And all of these folks are from New Mexico, and one of the reasons we have this panel is because we want to talk to you directly about what's happening here. And we have a lot of visitors here tonight, so this is a good opportunity, I think, for you to know what we all live with the nuclear colonialism in the state and what's happening in our daily lives. And so next I would like to introduce Tina Cordova, and she's with the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium.
Thank you, Leona, and thank you to the organizers of this event. Welcome to New Mexico friends and colleagues. As Leona said, my name is Tina Cordova. I'm the co-founder of the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium. We're a grassroots organization that was developed 14 years ago to bring attention to the negative health effects suffered by the people of New Mexico who were overexposed to radiation as a result of the tests that took place at the Trinity site. We were the first people ever exposed to radiation any place in the world. And honestly, our government has not been doing right by New Mexico ever since. This week we had an opportunity to bring somebody to New Mexico to help us understand a lot more about what took place at Trinity. And I always say when I tell the story, it's me telling the story, but when we bring somebody like Dr. Shanka, a nuclear engineer and a health physicist here, to sort of describe everything about Trinity that made it so dangerous to human health, and then to start the challenge to the false narrative that has existed ever since, we felt so blessed to be able to take him to universities starting with Northern New Mexico College in Espanola, UNM in Albuquerque, New Mexico Tech in Socorro, and New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, so that we can all start to understand and challenge the false narrative. Having said that, I want to say a couple things about the test that made it so devastating to human health. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but I have to describe at least a few things. The Trinity Test was the only test that was conducted on a platform 100 feet off the ground. What that meant is the blast intercepted the earth, really had no place to go, and then it took up a very large quantity of soil, sand, animal, and plant life and incinerated it. The bomb produced more heat and more light than the sun, and then it carried this fireball over 7 miles past the atmosphere into the stratosphere. The bomb was very inefficient because, as you all know, it was the first time they ever did this, and they needed to make sure that it took place. So they placed 13 pounds of weapons-grade plutonium in that bomb, only 3 pounds fissioned, so a complete 10 pounds of plutonium with a half-life of 24,000 years went up in that fireball. And then, for days afterwards, it rained down on the communities around Trinity. Now, the false narrative is that the area was remote and uninhabited. But we know that in a 50-mile radius, there were tens of thousands of people living here. And if you extend that to a 100-mile radius, which is partly per their own admission, because one of the things that was said afterwards by the scientists assigned to the test is that we can never do this here again because we so overexpose people to radiation. And if we ever do it anyplace else, we have to find a 150-mile radius uninhabited. So by their own admission, if you extend that boundary 150 miles, it exceeds Albuquerque to the north, El Paso to the south, Silver City to the west, and Roswell to the east. It's basically our entire state. And then you incorporate many more people into that false narrative of being remote and uninhabited. The other thing about Trinity that made it so devastating to human health is that it took place in 1945, at a time when in New Mexico and in most of the villages surrounding the Trinity site, there was not running water. What that meant is we relied on the collection of water in cisterns and holding ponds and acequias or ditches. And in listening to Dr. Shanka speak about this, it was incredibly remarkable, because there was all of this ash on the roofs of people's houses now, and it was July 16th, our monsoon season, when we really had a very significant monsoon season when people were literally filling up their cisterns, and now you have all of that radioactive ash, probably a lot of plutonium as well, going into people's water sources. That's the water that we used for drinking purposes, for bathing, for cooking, for cleaning, for every purpose that you use water for, and now it was completely contaminated. The other thing that didn't take place in 1945 is we had no grocery stores. We had mercantile stores, and what people bought in those mercantile stores were coffee, flour, sugar, cereals, rice, but you didn't buy dairy, and you didn't buy meat, and you didn't buy produce. All of those things, everything that you ate, you essentially produced yourself. Everyone had a garden, everyone had an orchard, everyone had a milk cow or goat. People raised animals for the purpose of meat, chickens for eggs and the purpose of meat. We hunted to supplement our food source, and all of that was now contaminated. Dr. Shanka talked about the grass, cow milk pathway, and how there is, this accumulation of radiation in the mammary glands, and then it is passed through the milk. And I asked him, do all mammals concentrate iodine that way? And he said no, and he said, I don't know, and we started discussing it further, and he asked me why I asked that question, and I said, well, because the nursing mothers at the time would have been concentrating iodine as well. And in 1945, the only option for feeding a baby would have been to nurse that child. What we found out also, and this is part of challenging that false narrative, what we found out also this summer is that in 1945, directly after the detonation of the bomb at Trinity, there was a huge spike in infant mortality in the state of New Mexico. Babies were dying here. And that information has been kept from us for 74 years. And when the government was contacted and asked about whether or not they knew what could be attributing to this, the government had the opportunity to finally intercede and do the right thing. And what they chose to do was talk to the lawyers on the Manhattan Project and make the decision to say, no, we know of nothing that could be causing this. And so people were losing babies. That is one of the reasons that Dr. Shanka has now decided that he needs to come forward and challenge the false narrative. One of the other things we found out this week in listening to him speak is that the people in New Mexico were likely exposed to 100 times more radiation than anybody was exposed to as a result of the Nevada test site. We also found out that there was monitoring being done during the Nevada testing through the summer of 1962, and New Mexico was downwind of those tests as well. And the exposures we received were cumulative, and we received them from 1945 through 1962. One of the reasons I think I was asked to speak about all of this tonight is not just to educate people from other places about what it is like in New Mexico, but also to make sure that everybody understands that if there's some expectation that somebody is going to do the right thing and come back and clean up their mess afterwards, please think again, because we have been waiting 74 years for somebody to do that, and it's never happened. And so I'm here to tell this story, to let you know that I'm a downwinder, that I stand up for everybody in the state of New Mexico who's ever been overexposed to radiation as a result of all of the environmental intrusion that's taken place here. And we are working very hard to get the attention of Congress. And for those of you who are from other places, because our congressional delegation fully supports us, but for those of you who are from other places, please, 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 take the time to reach out to your congressional delegation and let them know that it's time that New Mexico receives fair treatment and justice for the injustice that was done to us 75 years ago. Thank you very much.